Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to The Rookie Run, a video game podcast that pairs a rookie discovering a game for the first time with a veteran returning to see how it all holds up. I'm your host Louis, I go by the handle Lubop, and today I'm the veteran again. Before I introduce today's guest, some quick notices. Firstly, if you're enjoying The Rookie Run, drop us a follow, leave us a rating or comments on your favourite podcast platform. Also give us a follow, and also follow the social medias where I do some other gaming related content. All of that will be linked in the description. Secondly, spoilers will be saved for the latter end of the podcast, which is especially important for today's game. So if you haven't played it, listen until the spoiler spot, go away and come back after playing it, or if you're a freak and don't care, then just stay for the whole thing. Now that's out the way. Joining us today, we have a very esteemed war crime special investigator from the International Criminal Court. I'm joking, we have Adam from the Spectre Approved podcast. How are we doing, Adam?
Hi, Louis. Thank you for having me on, particularly because, well, listeners can tell, or they should know that you're from the United Kingdom, and they can probably tell from my voice that I'm from Australia. So our time difference at the moment is quite an effort to record. However, thank you very much for having me on and being flexible with staying up late.
No, I really appreciate it. Yeah, it's late night for me. Well, it's not too bad, but I imagine it's very early morning for you right now.
Well, yeah, for a Saturday, it's pretty early, but that's all good. I'm from the future anyway, so I always come with some good goss.
Yeah, that's how it goes. So I always like to ask my guests before we get into the game we're discussing, what games have you been playing recently, and also what's on your release radar?
Yeah, so recently I've been really diving into PC Game Pass, which is kind of a double-edged sword because, like, as everyone probably knows, the price value has dropped, making it more value for money. My kids play Fortnite, so the Fortnite crew always bundles into that really nicely. So I've been playing Undisputed, which is the boxing game. I'm actually big, cool. Despite how nerdy I look, I'm actually big into my sports games. Probably to do with the stats with it, but yeah, and we haven't had a good boxing game since probably Fight Night Champions, which was early 360 days. So I'm really enjoying Undisputed and its fine balance between arcade and realism in terms of boxing. And I've also been playing High on Life, which is the comedy shooter from the Rick and Morty team. Because whilst I love Game Pass, one thing they don't do well at all is they only give you 2 weeks notice before they take a game off Game Pass. So you're kind of always living on that edge of is an 80-hour RPG going to go before I can finish it? Because that's exactly what happened with Metaphor ReFantazio about a month ago. So I had to cram, I work full time, I've got a family at home as well, so my gaming time's quite limited. So I tried to cram an 80-hour RPG into 2 weeks, which just didn't happen on a good day.
Yeah, no, that would worry me too much because I'm so indecisive with playing games on my backlog. It's funny that you say that you're into the sports games and obviously the boxing game. I'm not, but I'm a big MMA fan. And we are being PC only. We don't get the UFC games, which is a little bit gutting for me. And there was rumors that we were going to get the new one, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen.
Nothing?
So
okay.
That sucks. Yep. Yeah, that sucks. How are you finding High on Life? I was never that massive on Rick and Morty, so wasn't sure how I'd find it. Don't know if it'd be for me.
Yeah, I'm very much the same. So I'm taking in small doses. I can't sit down for probably more than an hour or two to kind of play through it. The shooting mechanics are pretty good. And you can shut your guns up, which is a great quality of life feature because the premise for those that don't know the game is they're alien weapons that blabber on at you as you're walking around your levels. And the first one is actually the voice actor for the original Morty. And yeah, there is an option to shut the guns up if that's not your thing. But again, similar to yourself, the humor doesn't always hit too well with me. So I'm taking baby steps through it, but I do want to complete it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I wonder if maybe the humor of the show and the game is maybe full of Americanisms and maybe catered towards a more American audience, and maybe we struggle with that.
Yeah. Because I do lean to more the British and Australian comedy side of things. As for upcoming games that I'm looking forward to, there's a couple on my list. One, I've already committed the cardinal sin of pre-ordering, which is Echoes of Ironcrad. It's
I've not seen that.
JRPG. It comes out on 10th of July, so next week from recording time. And it's made by Bandai Namco, based on the Sword Art Online anime. Haven't had a good run with anime games in general. I don't think they're really top quality. But this one has a real interesting premise that was true to the anime, was that it's a MMORPG, essentially. But they don't have multiplayer, which is a whole other conversation. But basically, it's got permadeath mode throughout. So if your character dies, you lose your save and you have to start over from the beginning. And I'm a bit of a masochist when it comes to that. I like my old school Fire Emblems and stuff where death actually matters in a game. So yeah, I've pre-ordered that. The other one I'm looking forward to is Blood of the Dawnwalker, which is made the vampire game from the Witcher staff that have formed up a new studio there. Forgotten the exact release date, but yeah.
Yeah, that looks really, really good. I was skeptical when the first trailers came out. It looked like one of those ones that maybe be a bit too ambitious, but it looks like it's coming to fruition. So that would be really cool.
And it's so funny because I was catching up on your show in the last week or so, and your episode with Matt for Control, Matt Storm, and I'm also another person that's not really interested in GTA 6. So
makes sense.
Yeah,
I think it's maybe a bit of a growing sentiment. I think maybe the allure of GTA being wild, if you will, has maybe worn off now, and people just actually want good games. But we'll see. We'll see. I'm going to be waiting anyway as a PC player. So.
Oh yeah, exactly. We'll have to wait till 2020.
I'm not going to get done by that. Any day one issues. So if it's bad, then I won't buy it. I'll hear that from everyone else.
Yeah, but that's all for me on the gaming front, apart from podcast games.
Yeah, the podcast games take up a lot of time, but I'm loving having the the motivation to get through these games and something to dedicate my playthroughs to. It feels really nice.
Yeah,
and it's getting me to play some older games that I neglected, which is really nice. Today's game is Spec Ops: The Line, released in 2012 for Windows, PlayStation, and Xbox 360. Spec Ops: The Line has been permanently removed from digital storefronts like Steam and the PlayStation Network. I had a look at why this was, and it's a different partnership and music licensing agreements. Basically, they expired, and Yager Development and I guess 2K just didn't renew them. So I guess if you want to play this game now, you either need to own it, have it on disc, or go buy it on disc, or emulate it, if you will. How did you play it?
So, a bit of a story, actually, because initially I'm like, oh yeah, I own this on Xbox 360. I'll just grab the disc and play it. Well, no, it turns out I traded in my Xbox 360 and all my 360 games back in like 2023. And I completely forgotten about it because I hadn't touched them since then. Because I've basically been a PC player since then. But thankfully, GOG for the win had saved me. I had a copy there, so that's where I played it.
Awesome. Yeah, I had it on Steam from a while ago. So the game, like I briefly mentioned, is developed by Yager Development and published by 2K. It's technically the 7th game in the Spec Ops series, but I'd never heard of any of the other games, and I've also not heard anybody that's actually played them. Anytime I've listened to other people talk about this game or watched any videos, nobody has played the Spec Ops games, and I'm guessing that's the same for you.
Yeah. I went back and Wikipedia'd Yager and Spec Ops because I was sure this was part of a series, and it was all, PS1, PS2 military shooters, which I was an Xbox kid, so completely
me too.
Missed me, at the time.
Yeah. So in the game, you take control of a character called Captain Martin Walker alongside his Delta Force teammates, Lugo and Adams. You're deployed to Dubai, which has been ravaged by sandstorms and completely fallen into disarray, and your mission there was to look for survivors, but doesn't really go to plan. The game takes massive inspirations from the 1899 novella Heart of Darkness, and then the subsequent film that is also inspired by that novel, 1979 film Apocalypse Now. Sales for Spec Ops were generally pretty poor, and I read that 2K took quite a big financial loss on it. And this led I presume this led to the cancelled DLC that was actually had some details revealed about it. It was meant to be called A Long Way Home, where you escape Dubai with a new soldier companion. They had a full script that existed for it, but the DLC was never made. And then Yager have gone on to make a couple games. They made a game called Dreadnought that I'd not heard of. And then they also made a game called The Cycle Frontier, which was an extraction shooter. And at the time that came out, I was big into extraction shooters. I was playing a lot of Escape from Tarkov, which did damage to me as a person.
Yeah, you're a brave man.
Yeah. Did you play any of The Cycle Frontier?
No. But I had a look at Yager's history, and one of their the name escapes me right now, I'm sorry, but I did play their plane military shooter that they'd brought out previously.
All right.
I'd forgotten the name of it, but yeah, what their history and their future from Spec Ops told me was they have an interest in military because all of their games were kind of themed around that.
Yeah, see, The Cycle Frontier was an extraction shooter, but it was kind of like a sci-fi futuristic one.
Okay.
It wasn't great. I played a bit of the open beta and then played a bit on release, and I'm pretty sure it got shut down within the space of a year. But they're still active. They've been co-developing some games such as Outriders and the Dune Awakening game.
Mm-hmm.
So at least they're still active.
Yeah, 100%.
So with Spec Ops The Line, you mentioned that you'd played 30 minutes of it or so. What's your history with the game? What did you know of the game? And without saying what you may have known spoiler-wise, did you have any spoilers?
Yeah, so 2012 was the release year, so I would have actually been in the military at the time.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, out of basic and doing my specialist kind of trade there. So had a lot of free time, downtime in between training, cashed up because we were living on base. So all my money went into video games. So that was kind of the time where I wasn't able to play video games for that 6 months basic training. So I was kind of catching up, in the sense. So I just basically hoovered up anything at the time. So I probably bought this game, played it for a bit, and then put it down and said, no. Because when, not that the military shoots people for a job, but when you do things that are job related, I wasn't really big into military shooters. Some of the boys were well into COD, and that was their entire weekend, and I just wasn't a big shooter guy outside of Halo and stuff like that. My games around that time were basically Mass Effect and Dragon Age, what I played back to back to back. So I probably picked this game up, played it for about 30 minutes, and went, no, not for me, put it back down, and haven't touched it till you asked me to come on the recording with you. Over time, I have heard some spoilers about the story, though, so I knew what I was getting into. However, there were still some aspects of the story that surprised me as I went through. It was actually, interesting to analyze it, knowing what I was getting into, to look for, I guess, little bits along the way to see whether it was actually planned, coherent story, or whether it was just pieced together at the end.
Awesome. Yeah, that's interesting that you have a military background. I didn't know that before asking you to do this, so it'll be interesting to hear your perspectives on the story.
Yeah.
As with shooter games, I'm almost kind of the opposite. I used to play tons of shooter games. It was kind of my main thing, and it's something I've kind of drawn away from over time. My last sort of shooter games that I were really into were things like Escape from Tarkov. Also a massive Halo fan, as you can see from my background. Listeners won't be able to see it because I haven't got video, but yeah, I love Halo. My history with this game is, I think it was one of the first games I got on Steam when I got into PC gaming. So I didn't play it on console, and I got into PC probably around 2014, so a little bit later. And it was definitely one of the earlier games that I bought. Weirdly enough, when I looked on my Steam playtime, it said I only had 2 hours in it, but I definitely finished it before, so I guess it hadn't recorded it. But yeah, played it around the time. I think I'd heard, as most people do, that it was a little bit different. It wasn't your run-of-the-mill shooter, if you will. But it was very much of the time when I played it. A lot of games that were coming out had a similar sort of feel. to them. Maybe not story, this one's unique for that, but the classic feel and maybe the look of the games. But, once playing it, it's always been something that stuck out in my head. It's obviously got a cult following. People love to make video essays about it. So it felt right to be a game to discuss on a podcast, especially with someone that's not played it, where they can have those reactions to the story for the first time, bar some of the spoilers, because playing it again now as a replay, knowing those story beats made me look at the game differently. However, I'm also older than I was when I played it. It's been, 12 years, and I look at the world differently and look at the themes that this game is talking about differently. So it definitely resonated more with me. So I think the first thing that really stands out to me is the setting of being set in Dubai. Dubai is quite a poignant thing in the UK. We have a lot of people moving over there, obviously, for tax reasons a lot of the time, and it's a different culture, and it's it's kind of one of these modern metropolis. It's not a farce, people like to move there and stuff, but it's kind of very like curtained in a way, if you understand what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
So to see a game set there, and for this to come out, the while ago that it did come out, it's cool to see that. It's not a setting that you usually see, and I know the developers wanted to do that for the reason. It would have been very easy for them to just set it in any of your conflict zones that were going down at the time.
Yeah.
What did you think about it being set in Dubai compared to other games where they're usually set in those conflict zones?
It was super interesting because I've been to Dubai in the past. However, I haven't left the airport, unfortunately. It was only like a stopover flight on my travels. But like even the airport and it, like how lavish it was, how decadent, like Dubai is just a beautiful, beautiful city, from the parts I've seen. And you can tell that like it's got a lot of wealth, in the wealthy parts. So it was very interesting to see this place that was basically a hub, for people at the time, just absolutely destroyed and covered in sand and like ripped down the way it was. So that part of the presentation I was very impressed with, because even at the time, I'm guessing this would have been quite topical, because from a military sense anyway, it was the hub. Like troops, particularly in Australia, would go to Dubai and then go on to Iraq or Afghanistan or wherever they needed to go from there. So it would have had a lot of military traffic going through there. So it was very interesting to see their perspective on what Dubai would be like if the conflict actually moved into that safe zone, that safe area.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And like you said, the sand, it got me thinking on kind of two fronts. It's kind of implied loosely that obviously there's some sort of environmental disaster going on, and there's a bit of an ignorance from the rest of the world in the game's universe where the help isn't really there. If that was happening now, if Dubai suddenly just got absolutely ravaged by sandstorms, every organization would be there, right? The UN would be there. But in this game, it's like the 33rd, which is this American military division, are sent there, and some like CIA operatives. But outside of that, the help is very small, and it makes you wonder, in this universe, is it that there's environmental events happening all over the world? Or could it be the other way, where this is maybe a bit of a manufactured event, and there's a reason for them wanting to sink Dubai? As you kind of see later in the story, that there's some cover-ups that go down.
Yeah.
And then the other front that it made me think about was just how awful it would be when there's moments in the game where sand comes into play as kind of an environmental hazard and also like a weapon. How awful it would be to drown in sand. Because I was thinking about it, it's like, it's not like water where it kind of forces its way in. It's like eventually you're going to run out of holding your breath, and then you're going to have to open your mouth. And I presume you've got sand in your mouth before.
Yeah.
It's not very pleasant. So that really got me thinking.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I didn't even consider that. Think if, like, this had been a commercial success, they could have done, like, an expanded universe into this environmental disaster theory. Yeah, I didn't even think of that, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm always a big sucker for just wanting to know about the world in just everything. It's why a lot of like cool sci-fi games, like I'm playing Dead Space for the podcast at the minute, where again I'm the veteran for it, but we're playing the remake that I've not actually played the remake. And Dead Space has got quite a cool expanded universe. It's had some books and comics and animated shorts and things like that. So I'm sucker for an expanded universe. So when it ends with the one game, I'm just gutted. Outside of the kind of like, Dubai, the general looks, it's very of its time. I know a lot of people, and I like to call the games of this area, they've got the piss filter, where it's kind of that like yellowy orange, like Breaking Bad whenever it's in Mexico, and everything just suddenly goes like browny orange.
Yeah, and I think even with the PC port happening, and if it was simultaneous release on all three systems, that kind of explains it. But normally you get a bit of a touch-up, and depending how good your rig is, it looks a lot better. Like, I had a smooth frame rate when I was playing the game, but the looks didn't really extend to my frame rate upgrade. Like, it looked like a 360 PS3 game, for sure.
Yeah, it really does. The character models are very 360 PS3 looking games. They can look okay from a distance, and then when you're looking on the faces, it's like, there's not tons going on there. I think they set dress nicely, and the way they dress the characters as well can look good at times, especially with your squad throughout the game. They look more rugged and, they're a bit beat up. So that looks nice. And there's a few areas where you get like a nice vista, or you get some cool props, like maybe some crashed planes, where it can look pretty good. But I do agree, it looked better in my memory of playing it around 2014 than it did playing it now.
I will give the weapons some props in how they looked, because, like, obviously you're only seeing them from an over-the-shoulder perspective or when they're on the ground. But they weren't, like, almost blocky like in Minecraft, like you see in some games from that era. They were, like, distinctly different in the ways that they were different. And from my limited knowledge around weaponry, they did look accurate to their real-life counterparts.
Oh, that's interesting. And that's good to know. It makes you wonder how much sort of kind of military advice or advisory they got on this game. Because obviously they reference, legitimate military units, like the main characters are Delta Force operatives. I can't remember if the guns actually are even named in the game when you pick them up, or if you just kind of see the outline. But like you said, they appear to be based on real world guns. So That's pretty cool. I did then notice that some of the kind of gear and equipment models don't extend to looking good. There's a couple times you see Blackhawks in the game, and they looked awful. I don't know what it was, if they just thought, the players aren't really going to see them up close, but there's a bit where a Blackhawk flies over you quite close to the end of the game, and it literally is just like polygons. Like, there's no detail on the windows or anything like that. And again, that also does then extend to some like animations as well. There's a bit later in the game where you see some civilians that are, kind of trying to get water by any means they can. There's some water pouring out of a truck, and I saw a civilian. He's holding like a jerry can, trying to fill water up out of the truck that's leaking, and the water animation is just going out the truck through his jerry can onto the floor. It's just like, and the same with some of the like gore and dismemberment animations. So it's not like super gory game. There's bits, and there's scripted scenes that are definitely pretty gruesome looking, but in like the combat there's some dismemberment, and when you shoot the heads off of some enemies with some guns, it will take their head off, and the animation is just like 1 second they have a head, there's no animation for it like blowing up or anything, the head just disappears, and that was pretty janky.
I also had some floppers because a part of the gameplay is that like the enemies will like you can down them essentially, and they won't die, and you can come up and execute them. I had some floppers though, where like I'd shoot them, they were definitely dead, but they just flop in and out of the texture. Like the physics engine was having a bit of trouble rendering them.
It definitely suffers from some things like that. There were some other cool little bits that I noticed, like more, again, kind of like scripted and purposely set areas, like level design stuff. There's obviously a theme of kind of justice or injustice, and there's a scene where you walk into a building and there's the statue of Lady Justice with the sun shining behind her, and I thought that was a cool shot, and I actually found on my Steam screenshots from when I played it when I was in 2014, I took a screenshot of that, because then I also had a screenshot from Crysis 2 of the fallen Statue of Liberty, so I had like Lady Liberty and Lady Justice, essentially like both screenshots. So there's some nice sections like that. There's a bit where you're on a skyscraper and you look over the big skyline of Dubai, and it's almost, the skyscrapers have almost built like a sand wall where it's sinking in the middle. And there's potentially things to be said on the story implications of why it looks like that and why it's sinking. A lot of this game, you're traveling downwards, which is definitely intentional. And it's maybe something you don't realize when you first play it. I know I didn't, but did with this one. And it's something that you also see in like Silent Hill 2. You're always moving downwards, even if it doesn't really make sense to move down. And obviously that has story implications to it. The main menu was a really cool thing as well. I don't know how many kind of play sessions you did with this game where you kind of played it, stopped playing, and started again. But as you go through the game, the main menu changes, and it's a cool animated main menu where it's on a skyscraper, and there's sometimes a character like a sniper that's sat on the skyscraper. And also when you go through the different menu sections, like you can find extra kind of like lore in the game, like little pickups, intel. When you go to the intel screen in the main menu, it actually moves the camera to a separate room in the skyscraper. And the same if you go on the chapter select, I don't know if you had a look at that, it takes you all the way through the journey that the characters take, so you can kind of see their whole journey in a sort of map view. So there's definitely some really cool stylistic stuff.
Yeah, I did notice that. I beat this in probably about three separate playthroughs. But yeah, the sweeping that it does when you move through your different menu options. I had a multiplayer option, but it was grayed out for me the entire time. So whether that was something to do with the game and its availability at the moment. And I don't know if you had this on your copy, but there was a DLC grayed out part in the main menu as well.
Oh, I don't remember with that. There was the multiplayer, and I do know about the multiplayer. It was essentially a kind of tacked on multiplayer, and when they were developing it, they tried to talk like it was going to be something that they took really serious and wanted to play. I never really played it, but did do some research into it, and apparently it was very, very unbalanced. The time to kill was similar to the time to kill on the enemies in the single player, so very, very short. People basically boiled down to the tactic of using any single fire weapons that were really accurate. So even the pistols were just like super overpowered. And in general, the multiplayer wasn't received amazingly. I know there was like a game mode, like a kind of a push back and forth game mode, almost like a rush on Battlefield or something like that. Yep. That apparently had some cool stuff, but yeah, I think the multiplayer was definitely a tacked on thing, but I'm not sure about the DLC. It obviously wasn't for that narrative DLC. I don't know if maybe they had some special release content.
Probably
skins,
some costumes
like that.
for,
Yeah. I thought some of the brutality of the world in terms of the way it looked was good as well. There's definitely some striking images, which obviously fits into the story. If they didn't go to the levels they do with some of the gore and some of the scenes that you see, especially one specific scene that we'll obviously talk about, has something you don't often see in games that can be pretty shocking when you do see it. There's not many games that will show this particular thing on screen. And it does add to the seriousness and the reflection that the game's trying to make you do. I think if the game didn't lean into the gore and the obscenities that it does, that story premise wouldn't hit as hard.
Yeah, 100%. Even when you see the poverty that the locals are going through, like there's shanty towns and camps, and they do a really good job of articulating that people are literally just trying to survive. Like they kind of tack it on heavy in the story that water's the resource in Dubai that people are looking for. But I think in terms of visuals, they really do a good job of showing the people that are probably one day before the disaster hit were millionaires living in their high rises, living real lavish lifestyles. And then suddenly they're fighting for the basic of most basic needs.
Yeah. And that's interesting. I think in the, in some of the intel you find, and it's not really a spoiler, so I can discuss it now. It alludes to the very, very elite, all the way at the top, and it's kind of that thought of the elite are living at the top in Dubai, in those high rises, and the poverty goes down to the bottom, trickles down. So the elites knew that the sandstorm was coming and were able to escape and basically leave all the poorer people to fend for themselves, which kind of feeds into that potential theory of like, could it be this kind of planned thing from whoever is planning it? Which is pretty brutal when you think into it, just leaving a population to essentially drown in the sand or die of thirst. It's brutal. One thing that I thought could have been cool, and, obviously it's a limitation at the time, but if you was to think about how this game could play now, is you've got the feature of the sand, and it's a gameplay feature that will, we've mentioned briefly, and we might want to talk about it a little bit more later, but some more dynamic sand events would have been a bit cooler. They're kind of set up in very specific areas and, set pieces and cutscenes. And there is some sand movement, like when a grenade goes off, it kicks up all the sand, or when bullets hit the sand, you do see little like puffs of sand go up, and it does sound quite nice. It's one of the things I wanted to point out with the sound. But having some more dynamic sand events would have been really cool, where it's, not just these scripted moments, and maybe you can use the sand to your advantage. I thought that would have been really cool.
Yeah, I had a similar thought of even like death animations player death animations was something that the company definitely could have looked into a bit more, like even at the time, because you don't really get downed per se, or from memory. Maybe I just died and I was just playing wrong. But like your allies can definitely get downed, and if that could happen for Captain Walker, and like before an enemy came in to kill you, you could like have a QTE, because there are QTEs in the game, to be able to like throw up some sand in their eyes or something like that, to be able to then get yourself back up and back to like livable health.
The old pocket sand.
Yeah.
Yeah, some stuff like that's cool. And you wonder if they had one of these modern engines, if when the grenade goes off in the sand, could it create a bunker that you can then use for cover? But it was also a very off the time cover shooter, so it was designed in that way. I mentioned briefly about like the sound effects, and I'd like to talk about the sound for a little bit. What did you think to not just the soundtrack for now? I'll leave the soundtrack for a little bit, but the sound in general and like the voice acting. I mentioned the bullets hitting some of the sand. I thought that sounded good, but then a lot of the other sound effects were not the best in my eyes, and there was also times where I had missing sound effects. There was a like obvious like melee collision that just wasn't happening for the sound, or guns silent firing, which is obviously a bug. But yeah, and I thought the guns lacked a punch in terms of sound, and then that extends onto the way they feel like when you're using them.
Yeah. I didn't like pistols at all. I thought they all sounded the same, except for the Magnum that you got throughout. Magnum was really well done, but obviously that was attached to a set piece, so their effort was probably more there. I feel like the generic pistols that you picked up throughout the game were all pretty much the same, despite them having different names. The assault rifles were okay. The AK-47 did not sound like an AK-47, but the MP4, no, not MP4.
The M4A1?
M4, yeah. The M4, which is like the American basic rifle.
I fired one in Poland.
Good. Yeah? How was it?
Yeah. It was cool. It was way less recoil than I thought. We went to a gun range in Poland, and they had a mixture of, they had World War II weaponry and also modern ones. So I shot for modern guns. It's funny because the two of them are in this game, the M4A1, which had some attachments on it, and it just didn't have as much kick as I thought it would. And then I shot like a Raging Bull Magnum, which definitely had a lot of kick. And then the World War II weaponry I shot like a Mosin and an MG42 as well. So that was pretty cool. And some of my friends shot the AK, so I agree, it did not sound like the AK because that was loud.
Didn't really use the shotguns too much, but you're right in saying they just didn't feel impactful. Even the SCAR, the grenade launcher, it just felt like a pea shooter and sounded like one. Yeah,
it's a bit of a wet fart. I agree with that. I thought the voice acting was most of the time pretty good. I felt like Walker's lines, when they mattered, were delivered quite well, and same with Adams and Lugo. And sometimes just the cheesy chatter they do between each other. I noticed it more in the start than later when the tone shifts. I kind of liked it. It was cheesy. It was like classic military shooter movie cheesy. But it did kind of like give that, like, they're like bouncing off each other and a bad situation will happen and one person will crack a joke to like pick the other up. And I did like that. It made me care about the characters, where in a lot of the military games, these characters are they're just faces with guns, you know what I mean? They go from A to B. Call of Duty did it well early on at making memorable military characters, but at least there was that. The voice acting for them was decent. Some of the enemies sometimes, and there's a character, the radio man, that talks to you a lot. Some of his voice lines here and there, and maybe his delivery was, I didn't love him.
Yeah. So Walker was Nolan North, who is just in every video game ever.
He plays Nathan Drake, right?
Yeah. Nathan Drake. I knew him more from Assassin's Creed as Desmond Miles. So that's kind of always what I attribute to him. So it's hard not to see that character when I hear Nolan North now. However, just looking briefly on behind the voice actors right now, most of the actors, like we had Chris Reed as Adams, Lugo was Omid Abadi. That's their only voice credit ever, so they haven't done anything since or before. Bruce Boxleitner, who voiced antagonist Colonel John Conrad, I had seen him in a couple of TV shows, and the radio man who you just mentioned, Jake Busey, he's also a TV actor. So whilst they're poor quality voice acting, in my opinion, apart from Nolan North, is kind of justified, it's still not cool. I didn't like the voice acting much at all. I thought it was really caked on, really overbearing. The times when it was meant to be emotional, it was, but it kind of felt like either overacted or underacted in a lot of instances.
Yeah, I can see that, and maybe that is a symptom of some of the characters being TV actors. Not that I'm an actor myself, but I can imagine acting for TV and voice acting is quite different. You're not able to express yourself with your body. You're not seeing your co-stars. You're not on set. You're just in a booth. You're probably watching the cutscenes. But it's not you. You're not, and obviously actors play characters, but they're in their body acting as this character. Whereas with this, they're putting that onto polygons on a screen, you know what I mean? And I can imagine that can probably be quite difficult for them.
And I found some of the mouth animations were just weird. Again, probably from the time, but I had a bit of audio desync.
Yeah, it's definitely a product of its time, and it's tough when the game I just played for this, like you mentioned earlier, is Control, which has just excellent character models, and the actors look like their character models, so it just really translates very well. So yeah, I agree with that. I found some of the ambient sounds, again, just before moving on to kind of like the actual like full song soundtracks, the scenes where it will play, kind of ambient instruments that aren't a full track. Some of them, they just felt a little bit of a off-tone choice. The scene, which is the very famous scene that we've already referenced multiple times, it has like these electric guitars, as a lot of the ambient tracks and the full soundtrack does. And I can see what they were maybe going for, where it's kind of this extreme and almost in bad taste contrast of what you're seeing on the screen. But I felt like it would impact more if you had some somber sounding music. There's not really any moments where you get a real sad track that makes that emotion stick out way more. There wasn't a point in the game where I heard any instruments or a soundtrack or anything that made me go, God, that soundtrack's really making me feel something right now. It was always kind of just like, here we go with the heavily distorted electric guitars again.
Yep. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And it was almost contrasting, but I also wonder if, and I need to be careful how I word this because I don't want to step into spoiler territory, if it kind of fits with we'll say maybe it fits with the theme with going down or downhill. And as the music gets more discordant and out of tune, it's like perhaps there's a reason for it.
Yeah, and I definitely think there can be. It can kind of represent that. It's not really spoiler to say almost insanity of it. But I just felt like, although it might convey that and it conveyed the characters moving in a certain direction, it didn't make me feel a way about the situations, and it didn't impact my emotion in a positive way. Not positive as in it making me feel good, but positive as in like responding to the way the game wants me to feel. It just didn't hit the mark for me, and that extends like onto the soundtrack. The soundtrack is comprised of what are licensed songs, right? And I presume that's one of the big reasons it was delisted. Yeah. The main menu is the Star Spangled Banner played on that electric guitar. And I'm in general not a massive fan of games just using licensed songs for their soundtracks. I think it can take me out of the world a little bit, because although this game is obviously set on Earth and set in like, a potentially real timeline, it takes me out a little bit. I don't mind when they're dropped in there here or there. Remedy do it with Control and Alan Wake. Obviously, those songs are made for the games, but they're done by a real band turned into a fictional band for the world, which is great. But hearing these songs, and one of the moments later on is you hear Bad Boys. The radio man like quips about bad boys, and it was just a bit cringe for me. It really didn't hit the mark, and I'd have liked to see what they could do if they had a fully composed like original soundtrack for the game.
Yep. I basically agree with you. Jimmy, I don't think Jimi Hendrix can do too wrong with the Star Spangled Banner that we hear in the main menu. Again, I won't touch on it because I don't want you to lose your American fan base. It's Jimi Hendrix, man. You can't go wrong with his guitar skills, and you have to acknowledge his guitar skills.
100%.
There was one heavy rock set piece in a firefight near the end of the game, where it's just you and one other squad member. That really got me hyped and I think it fit really well because you've just got waves and waves and waves of enemies coming at you. But that was the only real instance that stood out. And I didn't recognize the soundtrack. Like, I'm looking at the soundtrack now, and you've got the Black Angels, you've got Deep Purple, you've got Alice in Chains, you've got Jimi Hendrix. So a lot of really well-known artists on there. But apart from that one instance, I have to agree, it just didn't really hit the mark. And maybe if they brought in a in-house composer, it might have gone,
Yeah, absolutely. It's not to say that the songs they chose are bad songs, because there's some amazing songs, and I love artists like Alice in Chains, one of my favorite bands. It just doesn't do it for me. One thing I forgot to mention earlier when we were talking about the voice lines is there's a little like potential fourth wall break late on. I think it's the radio man says it to you, and he says, "Where's all the violence coming from, man? Is it the video games? I bet it's the video games." it's just like so on the nose, fourth wall break, and I think that just speaks to like some of the mismatched tone in this game, where it can go to this like super, not introspective, but like deep train of thoughts about military action and the cost of war, and then it just throws in something like that, and it doesn't seem like it's trying to position itself as a game that's throwing those funny bits at you, like maybe a game like Control or Alan Wake that I referenced do. They know where they are with that sort of stuff. This one felt like it kind of just throws these things in, and it just sucks me out. And I think that's a thing with this game in general. There wasn't many times where I felt that immersed, and a lot of the things we've discussed, and when we move on to the gameplay next, are the reasons for that.
Yeah, because there was even a part, probably mid to late game, where it just throws a completely different type of song in the soundtrack. It's almost like when, if I have to compare it to something, it's when My Way is used in another famous piece of media that people will know about if they know the scene. And it's just like they've put this jazzy Sinatra-based almost song into a part of where something is going on that's super, super intense, and it just doesn't fit the tone, and it like pulled me out straight away. And I'm just like, well, what's going on here? Like, what's their direction? What's their goal there?
Yeah, it is a shame, because these things that dictate the tone, like some of the voice acting, the sound, some of the graphical pieces, it could be amazing considering how much people enjoy the story and the writing of the game. If it could do those things and really pull you into the world and immerse you in the ways that we've suggested it doesn't, it could really be something special. And I've not said it yet, but I think this game just sits as one of those like 7 out of 10s that's like, I really want to enjoy this more than I do.
Yeah.
And there's a big reason I'm here, obviously the story, and just with some of those smaller changes, it could be really good. We'll get onto the gameplay and talk about that, and it's the gunplay as well, and people love it. Like, it's a big talking point. People hound on the gameplay as this, and there's a lot of discourse of, it's not as bad as people make it out to be, or some people are on the other fence where they really, really don't like it and think people are, basically covering the developers' asses because of how good the story is to them. And it's a weird one with me. I remember when my feelings about it, playing it at the time, when I initially played it, thinking that the gunplay was all right, and something in my head before I started playing it for this podcast, this replay, was that like, I remember quite enjoying this combat and feeling that it had like some punchiness to it and some brutality. But then, like, playing it again after obviously playing games that do it much better and having all that time between then and now, it's not as good as I remember, and I'm not in the party of like, oh, it's the worst thing ever. Like, it's very playable, but everything it does for gameplay, it does pretty mediocre. The cover shooting is basic. It's Gears of War cover shooting, right? There's some like cool features of like jumping from cover to cover, or you can do like a sprint out, so like you kind of round the corner of your cover and sprint towards the next cover, which kind of adds some like cool cinematic-y stuff, but it can also be a bit like janky at times because you'll do that sprint out of cover and it doesn't anchor you towards cover, so you'll end up just like sprinting out. And if you come out of cover in this game, you're dying. Like you can't fight out of cover.
Yeah, and being someone that was essentially playing this game for the first time, I was like, okay, I do need to keep in mind that it was a 2012 cover shooter. So like there were just so many. I can't even begin to name others at the time that I did play. Bionic Commando stands out, but that was probably the only one. I felt the snap-on aiming was nice. That's something that you kind of need to get right, that COD just does. Well, COD of that time just gets so right, particularly because, like you said, you're just going to be behind cover majority of the time, because if you go out in the open, you're just going to get tore up. I did find the mantling to be quite good, and I'll give that big props up. That's not something that generally can be done well. Again, to throw it back to, I think that exact year, Sleeping Dogs, if you could mantle into like a finisher, that would have been amazing. But I definitely agree with those of the school that this was, it's mid when we look at actual shooters, because it's basic. Yeah, again, I was only playing on normal difficulty. I didn't go higher than that. So that might have changed something for me. I don't know. I have my own contentions with another part of the combat that we'll probably talk about in a little bit that I just couldn't move past. But in terms of like being behind cover, popping up, shooting, I feel like it did a good job, just not a great job. Like enemies weren't too spongy. They go down if you hit them in the right body. Like headshots obviously did more damage. The kind of downing of an enemy to execute them later was pretty cool. Grenades worked pretty well. I liked the grenade indicator and the fact that you could throw grenades back. I liked the destructible cover, but it was all good, just nothing great. And for the 6.5 hours that I put into this game, by the end of it, I'm like, I just kind of want to see something maybe a bit different, but it never really came. The turret sections were pretty standout, though. I really enjoyed the turret sections.
You always got to love getting on a big turret and just blasting waves of enemies, right? It's always good.
Yeah, and the fact that the game didn't make it super difficult in terms of like dying on the turret, I felt like I could still see you were getting damaged, but I felt like, because there's nothing worse than going back and having to redo those sections because you're stuck stationary and you can't basically save yourself. It relies on your shooting ability rather than your defensive ability. There's nothing worse than getting stuck on like a stationary turret section in a game. So I feel like they handled that really well in being able to get past that hurdle.
Yeah, a couple of things you touched on that I felt as well and kind of thought could have been cool. A little bit more like environmental interaction. So you said about if you could do kind of like mantle finishers, and you said about destructive scenery, and obviously it's there, but I couldn't decide at times how much of it was there. There's a bit where you run out into an open area and you've got a load of enemies on a fallen skyscraper shooting down at you, and there's a big pillar you naturally gravitate towards because it's kind of the only bit of cover in front of you. And when I was first playing it for this playthrough, someone fires an RPG at me, and it blows up the cover, and then I'm like, there's no cover. I'm stuck in the open here. And I remember I take notes on my phone when I'm playing the game. I remember like quickly pausing it and taking notes. I was like, that was like a really cool like emergent gameplay piece. And then I died, and then the same thing happened every time I died there. And I was like, was that maybe scripted? And that kind of extends onto my like, how much of the destructible environment is there really? Like railings will get shot off, and sometimes you'll be like hiding behind a piece of cover and they'll like shoot away the railings, and it's not really effective cover. But I couldn't tell like how much of the world was actually really destructible or not.
Yeah, okay. Two main set pieces that stand out to me is where you're at the top of a building, you're rappelling down to, or about to rappel down to the radio man, but you need to clear out the bottom area first. And you've got a sniper rifle. Your teammates have snipers as well. and there's snipers shooting back at you also. And I remember the concrete barrier there going quite quickly if you drew attention to yourself. Like, you had to really use your squad commands, which we'll probably talk about in a little bit, to kind of take the heat off you to stop your environment being destroyed. And the other one was, there's a part, I want to say a ship, but it's not right. You're on something, a metal something, and there's lots of like box cover around, so like wood and that sort of thing. And I found that was just getting ripped through right away. There's a couple of turrets that you need to try and flank. They're the two standout pieces to me. But obviously indoors, I felt like the cover was invincible. Like when you're moving through the casino and the hotel and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that it's the small ground cover is kind of destroyable, and it's pretty cool because it's obviously in an effort to get you to move around the levels.
Yeah.
And I did notice that at some points there was some pretty cool level design in terms of the way the combat encounters were set up. There can be some slightly different paths you can take, and there is a slight option for stealth at some point. There is some combat scenarios that can just be avoided, and I felt that's pretty cool. And they'll put enemies in, they have some sections that are a bit more like shooting galleries, but they'll put enemies in kind of like hard to shoot at spots, or spots where if you peek out of cover, you're exposed from multiple different angles. One of the very early on bits is when you fight onto the crashed plane, and you've got all the enemies like coming out on the wings of the plane, and then you go into the crashed plane, and they're using the rows of seats. So I thought that was pretty cool. And it's, again, like those cover shooters that were so popular at the time. It's a big part of those, getting that cover right and getting you to strategically move through cover. One thing I wanted to talk about, like you mentioned earlier, was the squad commands. And you obviously mentioned it, so you used it. I don't think I used it at all in this playthrough. And when I, realized it was kind of a thing, but still ignored it, it made me think of a game that I played in the past, around the same era. It was one of these kind of cover shooters. It was one of the Brothers in Arms games. I think it was Hell's Highway. That had a very cool cover system, where the enemies would be more in kind of like little tactical like units. And there would be like a suppression system where you would see a HUD element, and not to get into that game, the HUD element was maybe a little bit like take you out of the immersion, but you would essentially suppress the units to the point where the cover would break around them, or they would kind of like flee cover, feeling like unsafe, and then you would pick them off. And I thought that could be something that if this game did, it would have maybe made it feel more tactical and added to the immersion of the combat, instead of kind of just working your way round corners to find the angle, kind of one shot headshot the enemy and then move on. Did you use the command system a fair bit then?
A little bit. I mainly used it to get the third squad mate to heal the second squad mate when they went down, because I don't know if you experienced the same thing, but they were just dumb as rocks throughout this. Like, I'd move them somewhere, but they just run straight away, and they get downed, and then I'd have to use the third squad mate to revive the second squad mate. And normally while that was happening, the third squad mate would also get downed, and then I'd need to pull back and revive them both.
Yeah, it is an annoying situation, and it's a thing across all games where you have these AI that can be downed, but it's not in a game where it's like the tension revolves around your squad mates. In a game it's a completely different style of game. A game like Darkest Dungeon, if you've ever played that, where like losing your characters means something. In these military shooters and, kind of any shooters, having these companions that can go down just becomes a frustration.
Yeah. Because they could actually die if you ran out of time, because there was one time where I'm just, I'm leaving you behind, I'm moving forward. And then I ended up failing the mission because they died. And I'm just like, okay. So I do actually have to keep them alive.
Yeah, and it kind of artificially pads the difficulty out. And I didn't think it was the easiest game. Like I mentioned it earlier, if you do get caught out of cover, you go down pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So I thought the shooting was like okay in that sense. Like sometimes that can add to frustration because you die quickly, and there can be a little bit of disconnect in the actually moving into cover and moving between cover, and Walker not really quite going where I want him to go or where I think I'm inputting the commands for him to go. But that sort of stuff is kind of artificial difficulty. Potentially put in there to make you, again, move out of cover and not just sit in cover and pick everything off. But that feels like potentially a bit of a cheap way to do so.
I think it's also to potentially pad out the amount of time you spend in game. Because I think like on the easiest difficulty and without that real punishment of moving out of cover and without the punishment of your comrades actually dying and you found the mission, this could probably be a 3.5 hour shooter. If you had the skill set to like rush through on easy, you could probably do it in 3.5 hours without those artificial difficulty modifiers.
Yeah, you definitely can. Because today when I was just getting ready to talk and wanted to brush up on a few sections of the game, so I just had a look at a full game playthrough on YouTube, and they're like around 3 to 4 hours. So people are getting through it pretty quick. There's obviously paths that you can take through the game. One thing that they do put in the game, to make some variation in the game where the weapon sandbox isn't really something that stands out. We spoke about it with the kind of presentation, but the guns don't feel amazing. They're all just hit scan, run of the mill, just hold down left click or tap left click, shoot to kill weapons. They don't really feel like they've got any skill to it. They do add different enemy types, which is something that a lot of shooters maybe don't do. So in this game, you've got, for example, shotgunners, or a guy that will just kind of rush you with a knife. Later on, you get the juggernauts and the snipers. You'll get guys with RPGs, and what's kind of cool is the squad mates will call out when there is one. And you will want to divert your attention to these guys, because if the shotgun guy gets up close to you, they will, a couple shots and you're dead. So that's nice. They do add that, and then they add some set pieces as they should with a shooter, like the turret sections, or there's a couple helicopter sections. They add them in to spice up some of the gameplay. You also get the sandstorms. Obviously, again, scripted, they're not dynamic or anything. But there's a few sections where the sand comes in and it obscures your vision, but it also obscures the enemy's vision, and slows your character down. Obviously coming at opportunistic moments, but that's a pretty cool feature. And you can imagine, again, if you were thinking, what could this game do to change, improve, having those sand sections become maybe dynamic, where they can happen in any area, and it's, basically on a timer. I thought that'd be pretty cool. What did you think about the ways the enemies fought and the different enemy types?
There wasn't too many that gave me a lot of trouble. Like you said, when your squad mates called out for them, that did make them my priority. Particularly, turrets gave me a lot of trouble because they were potentially sometimes hard to flank depending on the terrain. And I found grenades quite sparse, or your thrown weapons quite sparse throughout the game to be able to take them out from a distance. I like the knife guys. They were super surprising when they were first introduced to me, and I'm like, oh, this dude's just running at me. Is he potentially going to be a suicide bomber or something like that? But no, he just had a knife and he killed me. And I'm like, oh, okay, now I know what to do there. I also liked, the shotgunners were pretty good. Again, they'll punish you if you let them. I found the AI not to be too bad. They would move around, and they'd talk to each other. Again, I don't know if that's scripted, but there's a part where Walker drops down by himself and you're left with just a pistol, I think, and you have to fight your way out of there. I felt like the enemies were quite coordinated there. Maybe I was just bad not having squad mates there to rely on, but I died a lot of times in that section because I felt the enemies just picked up my movements quite well and moved around, reacted to my movements quite well. In terms of the guns, though, using them in the gameplay, I only used probably 2 or 3 same ones throughout the entire game. I didn't really switch it up too much. I stayed with an AR on primary and a sniper on secondary where I could.
Yeah, I found I was pretty similar. There were a few occasions where the enemies wouldn't be dropping the guns that I like to use. So I would have to switch out. It doesn't really encourage you to do that tons, because eventually you do find ammo, and obviously there's not a massive gun variety in the game, so you are using the same ones. It's not something like, for example, Halo, where it's got this amazing sandbox and you've got different guns that really suit certain enemies and situations. So for me, it was mainly sticking with like the M4A1 and then probably a sniper as my secondary. Like I didn't really use the shotgun. I don't think it leans that well into the cover shooter, because you can't really rush people. There was a few sections where I got trouble. One of them is it's one of the sections after you make an early decision, where you basically, no matter the decision, you get the same outcome. And they as soon as you make that decision, they place a turret in front of you, and as soon as you then take out that turret, you also get a juggernaut. And between where that turret is and the next set of cover is quite a distance, and it actually can change. I thought the juggernaut would always come round one way, which was out of view of the turret, but the time I actually managed to survive and get through that section, the juggernaut came a different way and walked straight into turret range. I was like, oh, thank God, I can just like put him down with the turret. And I wondered if that was maybe like a thing where the game's going, okay, you died 5 times here, we're going to make this a little bit easier for you. Yeah. I do wonder. But there was some cool sections where like they'd obviously purposely like put some of the terrain in places where you're going to have to run into the firing line to get to the next bit of cover. I thought that was pretty cool.
I actually really enjoyed using the LMG, mainly because it had a big magazine. Anything where I can fire like 80 bullets without having to reload, I'm quite happy with that. I also really enjoyed the cool little slowdown when you got a headshot, to kind of like give you that little bit of feedback, like, oh yeah, you did a good job, we're going to slow this down, so you can feel like Max Payne-y almost, like you're gunning through hordes of enemies.
Yeah, that is true. And then you can kind of like chain those headshots almost. You know, you get one, it gives you that second to kind of select your next target and bounce around the headshots. One of the guns that I used a fair bit, comes in a little bit later, is you get like a scope like DMR, like a single shot rifle. Well, not a single shot, like semi-automatic rifle. So with that, you could just like bounce from like headshot to headshot.
Yeah, nice.
That was a pretty cool feeling. It's funny that you say you can kind of like use that LMG and mow down the soldiers and feel like Max Payne. I think maybe that's like also kind of takes away from the tone of the game a little bit. Obviously, it's trying to like portray like the horrors of war and taking life, but there's a lot of these guys in the 33rd that you're fighting. Like, you're kind of just like mowing down waves of them, and maybe that takes a little bit out of that kind of immersion as well. I think a good example of how games can make killing enemies feel weighty and like it has impact in the world. And obviously it's a game that came out a long time after this one, but The Last of Us 2, if you play The Last of Us 2, the characters react to getting hurt, and they have names, and you know, you'll kill a character, leave their body, sneak off somewhere, and another character will find them and like scream their name and try and help them and things like that. And I think because of the tone that this game's trying to set, something like that would have made it feel more poignant. It's not just mowing down hordes of nameless characters. There is a little thing they tried to do later on, and it has a cool little Easter egg if you pay attention. Well, not an Easter egg, but like a story beat. Is that they have a list of soldiers' names on some walls. So it's, you know, it's kind of trying to portray like these are all just like American soldiers, but there is a lot of them. You are like at points you are mowing down hordes of them.
A lot more for my understanding of how many soldiers are in a regiment. So I'm like, oh, are they maybe recruiting the locals? Or like, I was just trying to justify it in my head because there was way more there than what you would find for a single regiment of soldiers.
Yeah, no, I'd imagine so. And, you know, these things can sound a little bit like, well, very nitpicky, right? Well, it's a game. They need to put all these enemies in to, you know, make it feel fun to play, right? But I feel like when a game like this is focusing so heavily on that tone and the story, these things would have just done so much more for it. And that's kind of a recurring theme for our complaints. And then also the things that we like. The things that we like are the things that are adding the tone to the game, and they're making this world impact you. So then when you learn the story and try to understand what the story is trying to tell you, it all fits into that one succinct image. And then the things we don't like are where it's detracting from that and where it's making it feel like a game, or even just pulling you out of the game and going like, oh, I'm playing something old here. Or even at the time, like, this is kind of a little bit behind some of the other games. It feels like it's trying to be obviously like a Gears of War, but a Gears of War knew what it was. It's a very rule of cool, badass, I'm killing bug alien horrors and I'm going through waves of them, and the emotion in the story of that comes from the characters and the situations they're in. It doesn't come from these like adult, deep thought perspectives that this game does.
Yeah, 100%. And I guess, again, you could justify it by playing the disconnect and the horrors of war, but Walker constantly tells the squad that, oh, we're here to save Dubai, we're here to save Dubai, and the squad mates actually challenge him on it so much, and I really enjoyed that part of the storytelling. That like, well, no man, we just killed like 50 soldiers. They acknowledged that it's American soldiers that they're killing.
Yeah, and I guess, like, you could argue with my point of, you're mowing down waves, where it's like, it's trying to tell you that, like, you are killing a lot of American soldiers here. But for me, it just, with how mature the themes are, there's, like, a little bit of a disconnect there for me.
One part we didn't really talk on that I might bring up now is the environmental. So we talked about the sand briefly, but actually using it in the gameplay sense of shooting out the glass, particularly when you're inside the hotel section or casino section of the game, and using it to like mow down enemies that way. So for those that haven't played the game, there's certain set points or combat sections where you can see the glass and it's got all the sand pressed up against it, obviously, and if you shoot the glass out, the sand actually rolls in like a wave and takes out like a bunch of enemies. And I just found that a really cool first section when they introduced it. They become pretty sparse from the mid game onwards, I thought. So I guess, like, we all know they front load games to get people to enjoy them from the start, and then as development obviously moves on, I don't know how long this game took to get out from when it started. But as development moves on, you can kind of start seeing the cracks where like money might be starting to run out. So they're like, oh, we're going to have to dial back on that. But at least in the first couple of instances, I was really taken with I can use the sand environment to take out this group of enemies that's really giving me trouble.
Yeah, I agree. And that first section is cool where you first do it. You're at that point, you're fighting what's essentially like militia, like remnants of civilians that have taken up arms instead of the 33rd, this American soldier unit. And there's a bus that's obviously been like flipped over by a crash or something. And it's suspended above these soldiers. They're on like a platform, and you can see the bus is full of sand. So you shoot out the bus windows, and all the sand falls on them. And yeah, I agree. It's a cool thing they added, and it would have definitely been a disappointment if they didn't, because of how prominent the sand is as a feature for the world. But it definitely does teeter off, and feels like it's put into sections where it's like, we're going to do this now to like move a section of the story and the progression through. There'll be a section where like you shoot out some windows. I think it's in the hotel or like a casino or something. And obviously, yeah, it's there to kill the enemies, but then it also creates a path out through the linear story, which is obviously cool. But I mentioned it earlier, it would have been better if there were more like dynamic events that you could do with the sand and use the sand more to your advantage instead of just shooting out the big windows. And, I'd maybe struggle to say how they could implement it in the game, but probably just have more of it, right? And being able to use like explosives to kick up sand and create almost like a dust cloud for yourself, or like a smoke grenade out of the sand, things like that would have been pretty cool. That would separate it from just a run-of-the-mill cover shooter.
Yeah. Did you find that you used throwable weapons much, like the different types of grenades?
mostly just for the turrets. Like you mentioned, you had a hard time with some of the turrets, and because they're like pretty much fully covered from the front. If you have a sniper, you can kind of just get a bullet between the little cracks on the plating. But most of the time, I'd use a grenade to flush out the turrets. Outside of that, a lot of the times I'd forget I have them because you kind of just, you sit in your cover, you hide, you wait for the enemy to get up and shoot, and you can kind of predict where your cursor's going to be for when they pop out. So you can line your cursor up, so as soon as they pop out, you can just peek and shoot and get back into cover, and it's whatever. You can like blind fire over cover and stuff like that, but it's super inaccurate, and a lot of the time it just didn't really feel worth doing. It's almost like set dressing, just because blind firing always looks pretty cool, right?
100%. Did you find that because I played on controller, so it had the pretty standard layout. With the controls themselves, did you find that it was laid out pretty well for mouse and keyboard?
Yeah, I thought it was
sometimes
fine.
You can definitely tell these are made for like consoles as opposed, because it's got a funky.
It was definitely made for consoles. I think the from memory, the mouse and keyboard layout was fine. Kind of the standard button placement where you usually find it. One thing I did notice that I had an issue with was like mouse sensitivity. It was obviously developed at a time where mouses were, I guess, a lower DPI. So, you know, on my mouse, I've got buttons that will go up and down my DPI profiles. And even the lowest one with the lowest mouse sensitivity saying in the game menu was just way too high. Like the tiniest movement, the character would just like spin in circles. So I had to go into Windows and turn the mouse pointer speed all the way to the bottom. Then that meant whenever I was navigating any menus, I was like throwing my mouse across the mouse mat to try and select things in the menu. So that was a bit of a pain in the ass. Yeah. Was the controller experience okay? Then you mentioned the like the snap-on aiming and stuff. It's like pretty forgiving.
It was pretty standard. Yeah, I was using an Xbox Series controller, and the general like LT aim, RT shoot, A to like mantle your thumbsticks. Yeah, just the general stuff. I didn't need to play with sensitivity too much. I normally have it pretty low anyway. So this worked fine.
Yeah, see, I struggle to play shooters with a controller anymore. It's been, like I mentioned, I've been on PC strictly, apart from a little time where when I was in university, I had a PlayStation 4 for a bit. Strictly mouse and keyboard. So I'll use my controller for like third-person action games, Souls games, things like that. Obviously, playing Souls games on a mouse and keyboard is just horrific. So if I'm playing a shooter, I pretty much have to play it on mouse and keyboard. I played Control on controller, because it has like some really nice accessibility features. It has like almost like bullet magnetism where like it's not even just a snap on aiming. It's like if you miss, it will count as a hit.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like it'll basically just extend the enemy's hitboxes. But yeah, with this one, and like I mentioned earlier, I'm playing Dead Space. That's mouse and keyboard, because for those survival horror games, you can't be missing shots. There's not a lot of ammo about. So yeah, I think I started playing this on mouse on controller and was just not able to hit anything. So yeah, mouse and keyboard for me. We'll move on to the story now, which is where the spoiler warning's going to come in. From here on out, we're just going to dive into the story, which is the meat of this game. So, like I said earlier, if you've not played the game, please go and play the game before listening to this, because I'm not a lore podcast, so it's going to be very disjointed storytelling, and mostly just us talking about the moments that we liked in our theories.
What you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? Bad boys, what you gonna do?
So getting into a quick overview of the story. Essentially, Dubai is, as we explained earlier, devastated by the sandstorms, and the city is completely buried and has just fallen into complete disarray, and no one's really trying to help. There's no remnants of the UN. It doesn't even look like they attempted to go in and help. No Red Cross. The only people that go in to help is this 33rd Battalion of the US military, led by John Conrad, which is obviously a callback to the author of Heart of Darkness. And he stayed behind after the initial evacuation efforts, and when all the rich, ultra elite of Dubai evacuated, he stayed back for the civilians. But the US military lost contact with him. At the same time, there were some CIA operatives that were sent in on a bit of a shadowy mission to do some nefarious, essentially intel burying work. But as a result of the contact being lost, the Delta Force squad of Walker, Lugo, and Adams are sent in on what's meant to be a reconnaissance mission. But basically straight away, Walker and the boys realize that the situation has just gotten from shit to worse. Civilians have picked up arms. They're now fighting with the other armed factions, the CIA and the 33rd. There's clearly evidence of atrocities everywhere. There's people being hung. There's dismemberments. There's mass killings, mass graves, clearly like looting, people kind of taking it upon themselves to become almost leaders within the chaos, right? And as you can kind of imagine it going, right? If the world falls into disarray, the people that are gonna have the arms and the means to do so are gonna make themselves king. And instead of reporting back, Walker kind of takes it upon himself that he has to save Dubai and find Conrad and learn what the 33rd have really been doing in Dubai. And as you go deeper into the city, this potential to turn back is questioned by the squad mates, but Walker just ignores them and kind of has this almost like hero savior complex. I don't know if you got that from Walker.
Yeah, 100%. He's definitely like Mr. Military. I just want to come in and save everyone. Because like you talked about earlier, in the first 30 minutes of the game, their mission that they were sent there for is initially over. They were there to get the intel about what's going on the ground and then go back, or radio it in and then go back. But Walker continues forward, wanting to basically be the savior of Dubai and take down the bad guys, or who he sees as bad guys.
Yeah, because it's not really clear who the bad guys are. And it's an interesting thing that probably should be mentioned is the game indicates that the Delta Force operators, or at least Walker, served in Afghanistan with the 33rd. The Dubai deployment was their deployment after Afghanistan, so he has a personal connection to Conrad, which potentially like alludes to maybe he doesn't feel like he was a successful soldier in Afghanistan. Be that because of his actions himself, or just kind of the general outcomes of the ongoing, the long-lasting war in Afghanistan. But his personal connection to Conrad does seem to drive him on, but also him wanting to be the savior of Dubai, like you mentioned. And as you travel through Dubai, we mentioned it earlier, you're constantly traveling downwards. You'll be on top of a skyscraper, and you'll take a zip line down, or you're traveling downstairs. And it doesn't seem like it can always go down further, but it does. And it kind of makes you wonder of like, the game alludes to like dream sections, or kind of like whose hallucinatory sections. Does that extend to the level design? Is he kind of potentially just walking through like the same buildings over and over again? And you can imagine Adams and Lugo, and there are times later on in the game where it's revealed to you Adam and Lugo are seeing Walker's actions and being like, what is he doing? Like, there's no one there, and things like that. And I can almost imagine they've just like walked circles around a building, and they're both kind of looking at each other like, what are we doing here? But I guess he is their superior, and although they question him, he's the chain of command, and what he says goes. And Again, you can draw, the themes that the writers were trying to go through with that, and that kind of, there's like the famous psychology experiments. I think it's like the Milgram experiment, where like people will kind of do heinous things if there's like a white coat telling them to do so. And I think that this game kind of pushes onto that. And you kind of, you carry on through the game, kind of just taking out characters that are like associated with the 33rd. You come across like some of these dead CIA operatives, and the whole time you're kind of being mocked and also led on by the Radio Man, which is basically a vocal piece for Conrad and the 33rd. He's commandeered like a radio building, and you kind of question it, or at least I did, and then it kind of gives it an explanation of like he's somehow communicating across like all these military frequencies, and everywhere you go you can hear him, even though the city is completely destroyed. And I presume you'd be on like protected signals, right? I imagine the military don't just have their radio equipment just like anybody with like a...
Yeah, everything's encrypted. Yep.
Yeah, so, you can question that. But for the majority of the game, early on, you're kind of just going from A to B, killing enemies. There's a few little situations and choices you have to make, which we'll get onto. We'll kind of go through the choices that we made. But then there's a turning point later in the story where you come across a large group of soldiers, and your kind of only option to take them out is by using what is a very prohibited weapon, right? I'm pretty sure it's... I don't know the specifics of like its use and legality of it, but from what I think I understand is it's illegal to use. It's white phosphorus, which is a chemical that it basically, when it's ignited, it doesn't go out until it's like completely burnt out, right? And even if you starve it of oxygen, as soon as it gets back to oxygen, it's just burning again, and it'll burn through people, it'll burn through concrete, and I think it's a war crime to use it in areas where there could be civilians.
Yeah, correct. Just in general, it's banned. Oh, right, so banned by Geneva Convention. Yep.
And unfortunately, it is something that we still see used, potentially in ways where the people that use it go, no, it's not phosphorus. It's just smoke. And I know it produces a lot of smoke, so like could be used for like, oh, we're using it just to smoke out, but it's a very real thing, and it's a horrific weapon. So Walker uses this white phosphorus, and after using the white phosphorus, you like walk through this camp of the 33rd, and when you go to use it, I think it's Lugo that questions it. He's like, well, I don't know if we should be using this. Like it's a pretty horrific weapon, and Walker's just like, no, we got to get through it. So you walk through this camp of just 33rd, just like completely decimated, and they're like crawling around, they're begging to be put out of their misery. And as you get to the end of their camp, you find that you've actually used it on a trench full of civilians. And from this point on, Walker just becomes like really unstable, and something I'd like to go into, like after kind of just giving this overview of the story, it's like places where you noticed that Walker was going kind of insane, because there are some points and some very small details that the game does that's really cool to portray this. And after this, Walker becomes just like unstable. His voice lines change, and his kind of desperation to find Conrad and the Radio Man just become more and more desperate, and he's just completely forgotten what he's actually there for, and he's fully taken on this savior complex. At some point later on, you meet up with one of the CIA operatives that says, we need to go to this aquarium and take the last of the water supply away from the 33rd. And it's in like big tanker trucks, and under the aquarium, they're obviously like taking the water out of the aquarium. The fishes, they're no longer valued. The poor fish in the aquarium, the water supply needs to be taken away from the 33rd, and that's how we're going to collapse the 33rd, who have just run amok across Dubai. And you take these trucks and you steal them, and the CIA operative, I can't remember his name, Riggs purposely crashes the trucks, and you learn from him what the CIA were actually there to do. And it was to essentially kill the whole population that's left in Dubai, just completely dehydrate them. They all die from water, or anybody else that's left alive we can execute, so that this can potentially just be like a massive cover up, and like, oh, there was this huge sandstorm, everyone died, nobody was left alive. It is what it is, because they want to, from my understanding, they want to avoid a potential like international conflict from people finding out America's crimes in the game, the crimes they've committed in Dubai in the game. And you get some other choices that, again, we'll go into with the CIA operative rigs. Again, you keep moving through, you go through all manner of horrible situations, and you start losing teammates. And later on, Walker's hallucinations just go like off the rails. He's envisioning people that aren't there. He's seeing enemy soldiers as his teammates. And you're just on this everlasting mission to press towards finding Conrad, who's basically propped himself up in this like tall, I don't really know what to call it. It's a skyscraper, but it's almost like a thin, very tall tower. And he's like he's king of the castle over Dubai. Yeah. And you finally get to this tower, and when you go into the tower, obviously this is skipping some very important bits that we'll get into, you're met by a bunch of 33rd soldiers, some of the last ones remaining, obviously, after you've murdered hundreds and hundreds of them, as we mentioned earlier. And you find that Conrad's actually been dead for some time, and it brings you into some of the ending choices and some of the kind of ways that you can determine what the story was trying to tell you, and how much of what Walker was experiencing was real. And you get multiple endings dependent on the choices you make at the end, and that changes your perception on the game. Mm-hmm. So going back after that quite brief, not super in-depth lore overview, I want to go back through some of the specific choices with you, and I'll kind of do them in chronological order. And it'd be interesting to see what you chose compared to me for this playthrough, but also what me at the time I was playing it. I believe I'd have been like 14 playing it at the time, so obviously didn't have this kind of real world perspective of the weight of military actions, that an understanding of that I do now. From obviously, for my age, I've just kind of grown up with all these modern conflicts that, without trying to get like too like political, even though that is what this game is leaning into, some of the, you know, the conflicts that are ongoing are potentially questionable at times, you know what I mean? And the way I treated the game, and I don't know about you, in games where I make choices, I try to make it as myself. I find that I'm not very good at like playing a character, so I try to choose the choice that I'd make if I was put in that situation. Okay. Do you do that with like RPGs and stuff?
It really depends. Like, if you go back, and I'll do a little bit of a self-plug here, listen to our Baldur's Gate 3 series, I definitely didn't make choices that align to my personality, but I did more do that for this playthrough here. Made choices of doing what I thought was right in the instance.
Yeah, I suppose that could be interesting to think about, because like, you know, obviously, yeah, you have experience with the military, so you kind of understand that like chain of command and like when to make a decision that you're told to, or like what's right. So I suppose that's an interesting perspective. So the first like big decision you make, because there are small decisions you can make that don't impact any sort of like script in the game. Like I mentioned earlier, there's some combat encounters that you can skip, or there's combat encounters that you can like, someone will be talking to you and you can kind of choose to kill them early or let them run off and things like that. But the first big one is one of the CIA operatives you find, and Walker wants to save the CIA operative Gould, and he sees him being taken by, I believe I can't remember if it's 33rd or if it's like the militia that have formed. I think it's 33rd at that point. Yeah. So he's basically being dragged around by some 33rd soldiers, and it looks like they're going to execute him. And at the same time, there's also some civilians that it looks like the 33rd are also going to execute. And you get the choice between saving the civilians or saving Gould, who you think has like very important intel for you on basically what's happening, where Conrad's at. What did you choose for this section?
This one I chose to save Gould.
Yeah, me too. I can't remember what I chose when I was younger, but for me, yeah, this one, it was Gould. And that's kind of an interesting one for me, because I'd say my general morals would align with saving the civilians, but my train of thought with this one was, these civilians might die in this situation, but for now, it's more important that I get the mission done to potentially save more lives.
Yeah, and that's kind of aligns with my thinking also. And also just my experience with a lot of video games where they kind of pull the wool over your eyes thinking, oh yeah, you can save someone. I didn't think anyone would be saved from this situation, if I'm being honest. I thought they'd kill them both no matter what. But that's only from video game experience. So I thought this was a choice that in the end wouldn't matter. But my overall thinking was, yeah, the mission data is more important at this time.
And that is an interesting perspective. And there's a couple of the choices later on that maybe would advert that perspective. But obviously we've played a lot of games, right? I've been playing games since I was about 5 years old.
Yep.
And you kind of start to learn what a game, or what you expect the boundaries of a game are going to let you do, right? And how certain decisions are going to play off based on game tropes. So you'd maybe encounter some of these sections differently to how you may if you were actually there in real life. So then the next big section, not long after this, is obviously the white phosphorus. And although this isn't a choice section, there is an illusion of choice. So as I mentioned, you look over this encampment of the 33rd, and it's pretty much the biggest amassing of enemies that you see at any point in the game. There's a lot of them, and you can also see they've got like vehicles and stuff.
Yeah.
And obviously Walker and Adams are like, oh, look, there's some well-placed white phosphorus mortars here. And you do see white phosphorus periodically before this. There's a section where you walk out of a building just as or just after a white phosphorus attack has happened. It's not you doing it. So you understand the player, even if you don't know in the real world what white phosphorus is. You've seen the effects that it has in the game. You walk through a section, and again, there's like soldiers basically begging people out of their misery. But yeah, in this section, Walker is like, the only way we're getting through here is the white phosphorus. Did you try and fight without the white phosphorus, or were you like, nah, I'm burning these guys?
Yeah.
Yeah. Was this did you have this spoiled for you, this section?
No, I didn't.
No. So now we're into the spoiler sections. What were the things that you had spoiled for you? Was it essentially like just the general overarching themes of the game?
I was aware that Conrad was dead for the majority of the game, but I wasn't aware that the civilians get hit by white phosphorus. Like, I thought it was just the enemies, so yeah.
That's maybe a bit sick of me saying awesome, but no, it's good. It's the moment of this game. It's, you know, whenever this game is discussed, the thing people want to talk about is the white phosphorus. So yeah, I as a kid I didn't bother with this one, but in that section, obviously you can start firing onto the 33rd with just your standard weapons, but you can't get through them, and they get like super aimbot, and there's not a way through this section without using the white phosphorus. You have to do it. How did you feel like with that section kind of? Firstly, with the way the 33rd are reacting to getting burned by the white phosphorus, like there's a bit where you walk through and you can hear a guy like trapped in a tent bleeding for his life, and then obviously you walk into that trench and you find the civilians. How was that for you as a first time playthrough without spoilers?
I was like, I wasn't overly bothered by the soldiers because I was still kind of the mindset, oh, we're killing bad guys, that's all good. But yeah, with the civilians, I was like, oh goodness, what have I done? Like, yeah. Yeah,
and I got onto it earlier, and I was really trying to skirt around it, saying like, "Oh, games don't usually show this." It was there's children.
Yep.
And there's a really good shot where when you walk over to the end of kind of where the 33rd soldiers were. And a really nice detail what you're doing the white phosphorus is you're looking at it from, they shoot up like a drone into the air, so you can basically pick your targets. You can see Walker's reflection in the tablet, and you can see his face kind of like grimacing, but almost looks like he's like maybe enjoying it a little bit too much. But you get to the end of the soldiers, and there's one soldier still partially alive, and Walker's, giving his whole like I'm the savior thing, and the soldier points over to his left, and there's like just this trench just like full of bodies, and they're all cowered up, and they're just obviously like civilians. There's no arms, and they're all hiding. And in the middle of it, there's a god ray coming down from the sky, and it kind of juxtaposes thing of like, you're always going down in the game, or you potentially going down towards hell, but these civilians are innocent, and there's this god ray on it, and it's a woman holding a child, and they're just like, you know, stuck in time, like completely charred. And that's a brutal image. Games don't show dead children very often. So I bet I can remember like my reaction a bit as a kid, being like, oh, you know, it's bad. But for you, seeing it for the first time as an adult probably feels different, because although I knew it was coming now, I look at it with like a, you know, more knowledge now and think how awful that is, and the fact that it is used in places where there's civilians still to this day, it just adds like how horrific it is.
Yeah, it was definitely a powerful moment for me. Like, I paused the game and I just sat there for a bit, and I'm like, okay. First of all, what's Louis got me into? Thanks. But no, like, I knew that white phosphorus was used in the game. But it's just like, okay, like, this is how the game's gonna go. Like, from here.
Yeah.
We'll see. I'm hoping that's the worst bit. I was hoping that was the worst bit, over and done with.
It potentially is. There's a couple sections later where it's like the choice. It's maybe worse because you have to actually make the choice yourself. Yep. This one, it forces you into doing that white phosphorus.
This section, though, it informed my ending 100%. I knew exactly what ending I wanted. I was aware of like the vein that the endings went from here, and I'm like, I'd made my choice of the ending from this point, though.
Yeah, and a really nice detail during this section, once you discover the bodies, you've got Walker he's in kind of a trance looking at this woman and the child, and the ambient sounds kind of go into that like ear-ringy, like it's kind of like drowning out the world around him, and Adams and Lugo are behind him arguing. They're both kind of the opinion like, oh, we did something like messed up here, but Lugo is more on the like, we're awful, like we really fucked up here, and Adams is kind of like, well, it's bad, but you know, we didn't know, we had to do what we thought we were going to do. And their dialogue drowns out, obviously from Walker's perspective, but you can still read the subtitles. The subtitles carry on after, and that's like a nice detail of like a lot of this game, and you know, like the sound and stuff we mentioned earlier, it is from Walker's perspective, so things do get drowned out as Walker starts to like lose his mind a little bit more. So that was a nice detail. The next choice that you make is later on in the game, once kind of like Conrad's direction towards Walker in his head becomes a little bit more prominent. You come across two people hanging from a billboard, and you're told through your radio by, I think it's Conrad, or is it the radio man? I think it's the radio man at this point still. That one of these civilians stole some water to get for his family. Obviously, as we've said, water's a very precious commodity. The other civilian was ordered to go and arrest the other guy, if you will, you know, get the water back, and ended up killing and executing the rest of the thief's family, right? And the radio man says, you need to pick one. You need to pick either the thief or the murderer. Which one did you pick here?
Neither. I walked forward.
Yes.
Yep.
You just walked forward?
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm guessing when you walked forward, the snipers just opened fire on you?
Yep. Yeah, and I had to fight my way out from there.
Yes. So my choice as a child playing the game, a bit older than that, but when I first played the game, I didn't really think further than there being one of two options. So for me, it was it was killing the guy that killed the family, right? Yep. Because in my mind, how could you blame someone stealing water for their family? Yeah. And although that guy was told to go and arrest them, in what scenario do you have to kill the rest of the family? Yeah. So exactly. In my opinion, that was the right choice to make. In this playthrough, knowing a little bit better, I fired upon the snipers instead. But unfortunately, that doesn't actually save anyone.
It was completely accidental, though, because I accidentally skipped the cutscene, and I was put in it. I fully intended to shoot the guy that executed the family, but I accidentally skipped the cutscene, and it threw me into a combat section.
Oh, no. Oh no. But yeah, if you do fire on the snipers instead, everyone dies anyway, and it's just kind of like one of these false dilemmas again, where Walker can't be good. There is no good in this, and one of the things you find out at the end of the game, where it kind of like reveals all the insanity that Walker's going through, and all the hallucinations he's having. You do this, and it's just two dead bodies, and Walker is kind of like standing there, like talking to himself, just out into the ether, trying to make this decision. Because like in the game, once it happens, he's like upset that he's having to be put in this situation to make the decision. And Lugo and Adams are stood there, just like looking at each other, like, what? Like, what is he going on about? And whilst that's like a pretty cool thing to show at the end, it does make me think, like, really? Like, obviously they see Walker as their commander and they're following his orders, but surely at that point where he's talking to dead bodies, you have to go, we can't let him like go on anymore, right?
Yeah, and especially with like a special forces unit. Again, I've never served in one, so I may be talking out of my hat here, but they do promote, I guess, not free thinking, but like forward thinking, like, so
checking on each other as well, I guess.
You're not just a mindless drone if you're in the special forces. You need that next level of competency. So when that scene came up, I was just like, what? Because there's no way, especially like a sergeant that Adams is as well, quite high in terms of
Delta
rank.
Force is like prestigious as well, right? Like they're up there.
You'd say something. So I guess that kind of threw me out of the immersion a bit there.
Yeah, for sure. Like that's definitely one of the sections that it'd take you out of it. There's no way that this guy's obviously just gone completely insane. He's a danger to himself. He'd be a danger to you. You can't let him carry on.
It also made me
that's an unfortunate one.
Kind of confused, because if it is the radio man at this point, and like this is probably discussion for later on that you had planned, but when exactly that he started losing it, when Walker started losing it, because I thought I was able to grasp that Conrad was a hallucination for a good portion, but I thought the radio man was legit majority of the way through the game. But
yeah, so I don't think it's super clear, because from what I've seen, like online people discussing this game, there are different interpretations to all of it. But I think it does allude to there being sections where the radio man, you do hear him. It's more in like sections where the 33rd are held out and they have radios playing. But the sections where Walker is maybe being contacted by the radio man through his own like comms equipment is potentially hallucinations. And one of the things that the game does to potentially signal when there's hallucinations, and I don't know if you noticed it, sometimes the screen will fade to black and sometimes the screen will fade to white. And the general consensus is if the screen fades to white in a section, it's a hallucination. If it fades to black, it actually happened.
No, I didn't pick up on that.
Did you not notice this? No. So if you were to go back and play the game with that thought, it's very clear. Like there's a section where you fight a soldier and it looks like Adams. You come through a zip line. I think it's just as you come off the zip line, or once you stop fighting the soldier, something like that, the screen fades to white. There's also another section where I can't remember what it fades to, or if it like doesn't fade to something, but it's different to the others, and it's potentially signaling that Walker potentially died at this point, and everything else is basically not happening. And that is the there's a later bit where you get in a helicopter. I think you get in a Black Hawk, and it kind of like takes you into the starting section that you see early in the game, and you crash. That's potentially where they all died.
Yeah, okay. That's funny as well, because that does a fourth wall break here, where it's like, wait, we've already done this bit. And then Adams or Lugo's like, what do you mean? And Walker's like, never mind.
Yeah. That's, another fourth wall break. And it's kind of like, does it make sense for the story? I mean, like, potentially, like, yeah, he's died there and he's, like, stuck in purgatory. But at the same time, is it just the devs trying to be like, hee, let's throw in a little thing. There's another interesting thing that before we like talk about the other different choices that you can make, there are a couple sections where if you die, it changes, and again saw someone talk about it online, because I didn't actually experience this myself, but I'd only seen one person talk about it online. So usually if you die, you just get a loading screen. And one thing, I don't know if you noticed it, some of the text in the loading screen later in the game, it's a little bit darker. So usually early in the game, it'll be like, you die and you get your classic tooltips. Mm-hmm. Later in the game, it was just starts showing stuff like, how many Americans did you kill today? And like, was it all worth it? And things like that. I don't know if you saw any of those.
Didn't have too many late game deaths, no.
No, me neither. So if you're not dying, you're not seeing them. But yeah, towards the end of the game, it starts showing the loading screen like tooltips as like actually darker.
Yeah,
but
cool.
In these couple sections, so the one is when you, late in the game, like right at the end, you fight a juggernaut and it looks like Lugo. And this is after Lugo has died. And then another one where you're fighting in like a yacht yard. There's like a load of like grounded boats and yachts that you're fighting between. If you die in those sections, the screen fades to white with images of people, the civilians, burnt by the phosphorus. Instead of one of the standard loading screens. And it only happens in those couple sections. So is it potentially that like that's when Walker like could canonically die? Or is it like Walker succumbing to like full insanity? I don't know what that's trying to say. And it's very strange that it's only in like those very, very small sections where I didn't die in those sections. Yeah. And they're not particularly hard sections either, where it's like, the devs are maybe like, oh, people are gonna die here.
Yeah.
I saw that in a...
by that point, you've grasped the mechanics. You've got your loadout of what you like to use. So yeah, it's a cool little input though.
Yeah. And quickly, I forgot to mention it earlier. There's a bit where you come across like a painting of like the civilians burnt by the white phosphorus, and that's a crazy image. But yeah, that little loading screen thing's cool, and I saw that in a video by a YouTuber called Jacob Geller. So shout out to him, because I haven't seen anybody else talk about that. So that's a crazy point. So the next choice you make is you get to a section where you lose Lugo. So you and Adams are just fighting along together, and you've lost Lugo, and you come across him being lynched by the civilians. Mm-hmm. They've got him strung up, and you shoot down the rope that he's strung up by, and you can't save him. He succumbs to the wounds that he's got from the civilians, and the civilians surround you and start throwing rocks, and it does damage to your character. Mm-hmm. So it's not like a situation where it's like, I can just leave it and walk through them. Like if you don't make a decision, you will die. Mm-hmm. What did you do in this situation?
I shot into the air.
You did?
Yeah.
And just out of natural instinct?
Yep.
Interesting, because a lot of people didn't. So when I first played the game, I was mowing down civilians. Again, not really thinking much about it. I'm just like, they're enemies now. But this time, and I actually didn't know you could shoot in the air with this playthrough. It's not something I'd like looked into again. It was a scene I'd forgotten about in the game, but I thought, let me try it, or shoot at the floor. I shot in the air, and obviously, all the civilians disperse, which is quite nice. You don't have to kill the civilians.
I did try and push the boundaries to see what it actually could do before I fired. So I aimed at the civilians, thinking that might get them to back off. And then I checked if I could aim up or down, above them. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to try aiming up. And that did it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've heard other people say, though, if you fire into the ground, it doesn't actually trigger it.
Oh, okay.
I think it was Dave Jackson from Tales from the Backlog in his podcast about it that I listened to. I'm pretty sure it was him. He said that he fired into the ground and it didn't trigger anything. So he's like, I guess I've just got to kill all the civilians now. But it would have been cool if, like you said, there could have been some dynamicness to it. Maybe you can aim at civilians and they start backing up, but you don't fire, so they start attacking you again. Things like that would have been really cool. But yeah, that's interesting that you did think to just shoot into the air. That obviously shows your thoughts as a person. Do you think that, again, that kind of understanding of games, you thought the game's going to let me do this? Like you said, you kind of looked around, or was that just a straight instinct of I don't want to kill these civilians?
It was I want to try, because it felt like one of those points where you do have a choice. It didn't feel like you were locked into it, because I could walk around, I could move the gun, I like first tried to walk into them to see if he would like push them or something, but I guess it's just experience with games, but also what I really wanted to do. I was like, yeah, they killed him because by this point, like anyone in a military uniform has put them through so much. Obviously, like Lugo passing was emotional, but it was just like, well, these civilians have been through so much already. It's understandable that they would be aggressive towards people trying to help them as well. So I wanted to avoid killing them where I could.
Yeah, 100%. You got to feel bad for the civilians in this game.
If I'd played this back in
awful.
2012, though, I probably would have just mowed them down, to be honest.
Like I say, it's, you become more emotionally mature as time goes on, and try to play the games from the perspective that you'd want the decisions to be made if you are playing it in that kind of vein. And again, it's a part of the game that speaks onto real life and the issues around conflicts when civilians get pushed to that point where they might do these things, and are they really bad for it? Are they the bad guys, or is it the militaries that are placed there by shadowy figures above all of us? You know what I mean? Another one of the choices you can make, I think it's actually slightly before Lugo's death, is rigs. So after the water trucks are crashed, Riggs is stuck under one and it's leaking oil onto him. And you have a Magnum, and he basically is just like, bearing in mind you've learned that his whole thing was to just kill everyone. Via taking their water away to cover it all up. And he doesn't want to burn to death, as none of us would. So he asks you to put him out. What did you do here?
Yeah, I shot him.
You shot him?
Yeah.
Straight away?
Yep. In retribution, as well as much as put him out of his misery. Yeah,
you not think about leaving him to burn alive and kind of like pay for it that way?
Nah.
So for me, I was like, I'm going to watch this. I can't remember what I did when I was younger. I imagine I probably just shot him straight away, because it's kind of like the option that it kind of like pushes in your face. Like, it gives you the weapon. Yep. You can shoot him. With this one, I kind of like watched him burn for like a second, and he starts like squealing and stuff, and then I like put him out.
Ooh.
But if I was going to think on it again a bit deeper, I feel like he kind of deserves to burn, right? Like it's pretty awful what he's been doing there. But again, he's kind of a victim of the chain of command, right? He's been sent there to do this, to make this cover up. Who's to say that he's a bad guy for following the orders? All the rest of the characters are, following orders to a point. I guess Walker and the boys stopped doing that pretty early on, but the 33rd and Conrad and all that. So there is that. And then the later choices you make all revolve around the ending. I don't think I've missed any other ones, not that I can remember.
Not off the top of my head, no.
No. So, at the end...
Sorry.
Go on.
Was there a choice surrounding the radio man and his outcome? No.
So,
okay.
No, when you find the radio man, it plays a cutscene. You find him, and obviously he's been mocking you this whole time. And interestingly, in this one, it's Lugo that kills him. So he's a non-combatant. He's not got a weapon, and he's the radio man, and he's kind of just being like, "Yeah, you got me." And Lugo just like pulls out his sidearm and just caps him. And Adams jumps in. He's like, "What are you doing?" Like, it kind of shows that there is still something left to the squad. But it's interesting that it's Lugo that kills him, because for a lot of the game, they're kind of like the angel and the devil on your shoulders, whereas Lugo is the voice of reason. With the phosphorus, he's the one that's like really upset with it, whereas Adams is like, it's bad, but we're following orders. But it's a weird choice that they had Lugo kill the radio man here. And I'm not really decided on why it is that they had Lugo kill him.
I think, from what I can discern from it, because you're talking about it, re-triggered the cutscene in my head. I think it's because he's like the tech guy. Like, he knows how all the radio stuff works, so he gets the information out of him by basically buttering him up and saying, "Oh, you've achieved greatness by doing this radio signal. How'd you go about it? Tell me, like, I want to know. Like, you're the man. Like, tell me how you did it." So he tells him, and he's like, "Oh, you just switch it here." And that's when Lugo goes over, switches it, and then just shoots him. Because, yeah, I think it was because he's like the tech knowledge guy that was going to fix the radio anyway, and he just wanted to get the info out of him.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And it's probably also in an effort to show that, like, even though Lugo can be like the voice of reason, there's never like a perfect situation here, and everyone is losing it a little bit. So yeah, the final sort of like actual choices that you make is towards the ending. So at this point, you've lost Lugo, and you get to the bottom of the tower with Adams, and Adams is basically like, I'm gonna stay behind. And it's funny because Adams has completely lost his way with Walker at this point. He's disillusioned, and he knows Walker has completely lost his mind, but he's kind of got to this point where he's like, we've done this now, like we've committed these atrocities, there's no way out for me. I'm gonna be put in the Hague when we get, if we get out of this. I need to find my way out. So he's like, you go on, I'm gonna hold off the 33rd, I'm gonna die here. And you go through, and like I mentioned, there's a bit where you fight a juggernaut, and you see it as Lugo, which is one of those sections where it goes to white, and if you die, you get the funny cutscene there. So you go into the tower, like I said, you're kind of met by the 33rd, and you find Conrad dead. And Walker he sees it and acknowledges that Conrad is dead, but then immediately goes into having visions of Conrad. And how many choices did you think you had here?
I thought that there were 2.
Yeah. But then it extends on to the further choices. Did you see those further choices?
No, so I did not make it that far. So I can talk about my ending if you like.
Yeah, go for it.
So basically what happens is Walker starts talking to Conrad, and Conrad points a gun at him, I think, and you have the option of responding, either shooting Conrad or letting him shoot you. I let Conrad shoot.
That's where there is further options.
Yeah, so...
And that's what I was kind of alluding to.
I let Conrad shoot me, which ends up being Walker shooting himself. I had Walker commit suicide.
Instead of shooting Conrad or letting Conrad shoot you, you can choose to aim the gun at yourself as well.
Yep.
So there is that other choice. So like, although it is the 2 choices, it's the same outcome. There is that kind of further choice, and then it leads on to the choices. So you said you let Conrad shoot you. Yeah. Okay. So for me with this playthrough, I shot myself. And I think I did the same for my original playthrough. Have you seen what the other options are?
I did. I went and watched it on YouTube.
Yeah, so if you shoot Conrad, Walker makes it out of the town, and the tower, and he's now essentially taken over the role of Conrad. He's the king in the high tower, and he comes out and is approached by a further military battalion. It's not like the 33rd; it's like another battalion that have come in for like a further evacuation effort. And they try to de-escalate with you, and they kind of usher you to put down the guns. And you get a choice here. You can fight them, or you can go with them. And then this extends into 3 outcomes. So you can fight them, you can kill them all. And if you kill them all, if I'm remembering correctly, Walker says something on the radio.
Yeah.
Can you remember what he says?
It's the same opening line that Conrad says at the start of the game.
There you go. Yeah.
But basically, like you said, he takes over Conrad's role as like the dictator of Dubai. I think it's like Welcome to Dubai or something.
Yeah, that might be it. But there's not a lot left to preside over. He's the king on a pile of shit, you know what I mean? There's nothing left.
Yeah, gentlemen, welcome to Dubai, which is what Conrad said at the start.
There you go. So yeah, he's like the king of Dubai, but there's nothing left, and it makes you wonder. Like I mentioned with the DLC, it was like Escape in Dubai, but I'm not sure when that would have been set in the game if it was like off the back of that ending. But like, where does that go from there for Walker? What happens? I can almost just imagine he just kind of like succumbs into just this ball of just like insanity and ends up with a similar fate to Conrad, right?
Yep.
Like just offs himself in that tower. You can then also obviously surrender to the military, and in that they take you away in the Humvee, and I'm pretty sure one of the soldiers like says to Walker something along the lines of like, "Oh, how did you make it out? Like, how did you not die in there?" And he says like, "Who says I made it out?" Which again potentially feeds into that theory of like, did he die in that helicopter section or the section with the Juggernaut? So in the section where you would fight the military and, you know, you don't beat them in the shootout and you die, Walker he dies in the desert, but he recalls a memory of Colonel Conrad telling him that men like us can never truly go home. So it kind of, no matter the ending here, it's this kind of Walker is left in Dubai in some way. He's either dead in Dubai, he's either left just completely being insane in Dubai, or on his way out, he's obviously traumatized and he says like, "Oh, who says I made it out alive?" And either potentially he's just completely twisted from the things he's done and he's never going to escape that like torment, or again, that theory of like he actually died earlier in the game and this is kind of like all of a hallucination.
Yeah, very consistent with like Vietnam and Gulf War era, like shell shock themes there of like remaining in the place where the PTSD happened.
Yeah, definitely, and it definitely is trying to speak on those conflicts. You know, you can talk about older conflicts where it's like, you know, although the soldiers saw horrific things, maybe they felt some sort of righteousness. But this game really creates a setting where there's not really a clear conflict even going on. It's just a hodgepodge of like power imbalances and people realizing they're in a position where they can take power and basically bend their environment to their will.
Yep.
And I think that's what it's trying to speak to overall. It's kind of trying to speak to no matter the chain of command, people are going to take advantage of the weak and will eventually lose themselves to that power.
Do you like have a personal canonical ending for how you see the game?
I think the ending that would make the most sense for me would be the ending where Walker would come out of the tower, fire upon the military, and be killed by them. I think that makes the most sense to me, in terms of like realism, and it feels like a, I don't know what word to use. It feels like a satisfying end to Walker, because the way I see it is he'd come out this tower, and although he's managed to mow down the hundreds of 33rd, as we mentioned, you could potentially argue that a lot of that was a hallucination, and potentially he's seeing himself fighting more soldiers than he really was.
Yeah.
And for him to come out and be killed by what is an overwhelming force makes sense, and it puts an end to his evil. I can't imagine a timeline where he manages to just live in Dubai and nobody comes to, you know, sort Dubai out. As we said, like the UN don't, like people are going to come for him. They're going to see the remnants of the atrocities he did, right? They're going to see these dead soldiers everywhere. And I think one of the soldiers like mentions it, like I said, like, "Oh, how did you get through all of that?" And you know, they're going to see the remnants of the white phosphorus and things like that. And he's not going to make it out of that, or he's, you know, going to get put into prison. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you on that in terms of like realistic. I would like to think that Walker felt enough guilt from the things he'd done to end his own life, but even like at the very start of the game, he still has delusions of grandeur. Like he's going in thinking he's going to save them in a 3-man team. So I don't believe that seeing Conrad dead the whole time would have been enough of a break for him to stop what he was seeing himself doing. So yeah, that ending where he'd go down and try and fight his way out and then just get mowed down.
That makes sense to me. At what point did you start realizing how insane Walker was going, and what were the things that really led you onto it? I know you mentioned like the phosphorus was where you were like, the game's going to end this way. Yeah. I know where this is going. Obviously you knew about Conrad being dead. What were the points where like you were like really like, "Oh, this is going," because you didn't notice like the change in the fade in the screen and stuff?
I'm also still a bit confused of when Conrad actually died.
So I think that it I mean, obviously from the state of his body, he's not in a good way. It doesn't look like he's died recently. So I'm pretty sure that he died before the Delta Force ever even made it into Dubai. Like, there's not a point during the game that he's actually alive. And I think it hints again at that in those sections where it plays back those sections where Walker was talking to himself or talking to dead bodies. None of those sections actually show any real communication with Conrad.
Yeah.
So I think Conrad's dead the whole time.
So, well, going off that, because I would also agree with that, that says to me, because there's conversation between Conrad and Walker prior to the white phosphorus instance. Initially, I would have said, the white phosphorus is what pushed him over the edge, because that's what the game really throws in your face. But, like, again, we just need to be able to see some preamble of how they actually got there. Like, because I don't see Delta just sending in a 3-man team as well. So whether he's been cuckoo the whole time, that's kind of what I'm leaning towards now.
Yeah, and that's interesting you say that, because I had remembered a detail that I mentioned earlier but didn't want to fully say it. So in that bit where you go into a building and it's quite near the end of the game and there is a list of names of the fallen 33rd all scrawled on the walls, you can find Lugo and Adams' names on that wall.
Oh, okay.
That potentially indicates that they were never actually Delta Force and they were potentially 33rd soldiers. Yep. So does that potentially say that Walker went in on his own?
Yeah.
Or was never even really there? Like, and this is where the game is up to interpretation. There's no confirmation of this. And, you know, if you were to go and look at the different interpretations on the internet, whilst there are like quite succinct ways of thought, and most people see the game in certain ways, something like that makes you wonder, like, and again, like you're saying, why would they just send a 3-man team in and not have any sort of overwatch or anything? There's no like air support, there's no recon, there's nothing. It's just these guys just let loose in the desert.
Yep.
It doesn't show you how they got inserted. They kind of, after the helicopter, kind of like a flashback scene at the start, they're just walking through the desert, they take their goggles off and they're like, yeah, we're here now.
Yeah.
So like it makes you wonder like how much of it was real, and you could potentially even stretch it to like the whole thing is just hallucination and none of it's even happening. And is this actually a soldier that is basically tormented by what he saw in Afghanistan and is imagining this whole scenario? And potentially Lugo and Adams were people that he served with with the 33rd in Afghanistan that he lost, and they were maybe his closest friends, and he's kind of hallucinating this mission of grandeur. And, all the events that transpire through the game are things he's witnessed with his previous military service.
Yeah. And
he can't escape potentially seeing Conrad as this evil figure, because Conrad was potentially the one giving him the orders in Afghanistan and previous conflicts where he potentially did things that he's not proud of.
Because even the composition of the team, and I'm only going off Australian Army stuff, I know the ranks in America are a bit different. But again, the foreknowledge of a captain, a sergeant, and I think he's a corporal going in together. That's just a weird composition of a team itself. Like, and a high or a middle officer rank, and then dropping all the way down to a sergeant. Like, normally it'd be like maybe a sergeant, a corporal, and like a PNC going in as a 3-man.
Right.
So it's, I don't know.
Again, that's cool. That's cool. Like background knowledge. Is it done on purpose, or is it a little bit of a lapse in understanding by the dev team? I don't know who, like if they had real military advisors, or they were just going off what they could find out online, or potentially just different in the American military.
Yeah.
But that's interesting.
Everything just throws up more questions. We really need a sequel.
Does. Yeah, or that DLC, or I don't know. I like it that it's open to interpretation. I think it says a lot about the quality of some of the writing. Obviously we mentioned there's some points where the writing's a bit like, that doesn't make sense with the hanging bodies and Lugo and Adams not questioning him. But again, that feeds into the theory of, were they even really there?
Yeah.
So it shows that, they clearly planned out this story in quite a decent way to the point where they can have a start and an end, multiple ends, but still have it written in a way where you can question everything in the game. I think that's not an easy thing to achieve in game writing, and there's not many games that do it.
Yeah.
Something like a game that comes to mind with that is like Silent Hill 2. I don't know if you played Silent Hill 2. You can spend all day questioning James's psyche and what all the different things mean. I saw like a meme the other day. My friend sent me it. There's a bit in Silent Hill 2 remake where you can't go up a stairway because there's like a couple plastic boxes in the way, and someone was like, "Oh, this is bullshit! Like you could just move the plastic boxes." And someone in the comments was like, "No, the plastic box represents like the heaviness of his guilt, and he just can't move it." And it made me laugh. But yeah, there's not many games that can trigger that much thought and that much debate.
Yeah, I do have to say though, if this game didn't have the quality of story that it did, I would have struggled to get through it. I think
100%.
Moving in, like if you want to move into overall thoughts, I guess the story is what carried this game by far, and really what set it apart. And two reasons. If I wasn't coming on a podcast to talk about it, and if it didn't have such a good story, this wouldn't be a game that I would have the time of day for.
No, I don't even think it'd be a game that I'd see to the end. Like if this had like the story quality of, say, some of the more modern Call of Duties, because some of the old Call of Duties had some pretty good stories, where it's just, there's the big bad, we have to go kill the big bad, we save the world. It's like there's not enough redeeming qualities in the rest of the game to keep you going. But that story is there, and it's, if the story was like that, it's hard to do the out of 10 ratings, but like I said, this game is like one of those like legendary 7 out of 10s, and for me 7 out of 10 games are like a genre of games. There's like a few of them that are like they sit I don't know if you've ever heard of like I Divine Cybermancy.
Yep.
I did that as the first episode. That's a 7 out of 10. And yeah, Spec Ops The Line sits where it's like, it's likable, but it has glaring issues. And that's kind of how they sit for me. Yeah, it's not something that's easily replayable once you know the story. And it felt a bit strange replaying it. It'd been long enough for me to where I could replay it and see some of the scenes I'd forgotten about. And like I said, make those choices with a different frame of mind.
Yep.
Something I do like to ask, like my guests, do you think this is a game that warrants a remake, or if not a sequel?
I think it does deserve a remake. I don't believe that dev studios would have the balls to go where this game went for a modern day remake. If I'm being blunt, like
no,
I don't see like they'd center the white phosphorus scene somehow. We wouldn't see that iconic scene of the mother and child. Because I don't want to touch back too much on Silent Hill 2 remake. I know there was some scenes that were changed, let's just say, for that I think made the game less impactful. And I don't think in the modern gaming landscape and architecture that a sequel or remake would do it justice.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think there is so much potential for what they could do to clean up this game for a remake. Like I said, having the combat better and just having it be a more fun game to play in general. But also that thing that we spoke about quite often is the things that take you out of the game and out of the immersion could just be so good in a remake. A good example is Resident Evil 2, the remake of that. Obviously, it changes the style of game like completely, right? It turns it into an over the shoulder shooter. But the bits of immersion it adds just do so much for the horror. Also, like Dead Space that I'm playing at the minute, the changes they've made, it just drags you in so much more. And if they could sort out some of the voice acting, the soundtrack, make it more fun, make the environment react more and feel more visceral, it would just draw you into that story so much. And even though it's a cheap thing to comment on, and graphics don't matter in the grand scheme of things because there's emotional games that grab you that are, 8-bit pixel games. But seeing those characters look more real, it has an impact. Seeing the emotions on their face, getting, good mocap actors and stuff like that, it could be something amazing. But I do agree with you. I don't think it would ever get done justice. And it's probably better being left to stand the kind of test of time, because I don't foresee opinions on this game ever changing, no matter how far in the future we get and how much games improve to the point where we're plugging chips into ourselves and just imagining the game. You're always going to be able to go back and appreciate this story because it's essentially a timeless piece of storytelling, even though it's very much akin to stories that have been told before it. You know, it wears its inspirations on its sleeve. It's very good. And even if you just do it for that, even if you just watch a playthrough of it, it's worth doing.
Yeah.
So I think that pretty much rounds it up. I don't think I have much else to talk on about that. An interesting thing that's cool to say at the end of the podcast is, do you get achievements on GOG?
No, there were not. It doesn't have an achievement list.
The achievement that you get at the end of the game is you are relieved. Which is like a nice little double meaning, and it can be a nice way to send off the podcast. You're relieved because the game's over. You're relieved of your service. You're also relieved because Walker is potentially dead in your playthrough.
Yep.
So thanks so much for joining me. I really enjoyed talking about that one. And I'm really glad to be able to talk to someone that's not played it in current day. You know, it's within like gaming circles, it's a game that gets brought up a lot, and it might be a bit hard found to find someone that's not played it. So it was really good to talk to you from that perspective.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. It had me dredge it up, and it's one more game I can tick off the 1,000 and something game backlog list I still have to go.
Oh yeah, let's not even get into that. It's growing every day. Before we end off, do you want to plug your podcast again? I mentioned it at the start.
Yeah, sure. So I am a co-host on the Spectre Approved podcast that I host with my co-host Fenris. We initially started out as a BioWare podcast, but then, like, because of the state of that studio, I guess, we wanted to, I guess, spill into other types of games as well. So we've actually only played one BioWare game. We've got nearly 30 episodes in the podcast, and we've only covered off one BioWare game. But basically, Fenris and I chose from a list of games to play, and each fortnight, 2 weeks for Americans, because I know you don't use that, we play a game from our list there and talk about it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I've listened to a couple episodes before we recorded this. Just I like to almost get to know my guests without actually speaking to them. So I listened to a couple episodes on games that I played. I think you did a Last of Us episode, right?
Yep.
So I listened to some of that. So yeah, again, if you've enjoyed the podcast, leave any comments, ratings, follows, and join us back for episodes in the future. Thank you. Bye.
On my mind, no doubt about it, she looks so fine. She's the best girl that I ever